If she can't speak, she can't fly. That sentence, that voice, it echoed through the cabin like someone had pulled the fire alarm on human decency. I turned my head just in time to see Monica, tight bun, sharper tone, grabbing my daughter's arm, trying to yank her from her seat. Liana's speech device nearly slipped from her tray table, still lit up with a message she'd typed moments earlier. I understand the safety rules. I'm okay. But Monica didn't care. She didn't read the screen. She didn't look at Liana like a person. Just a problem. Let go of my daughter, I said, trying to stay calm, trying not to let my voice tremble. But inside me, something ancient stirred. Something I hadn't needed to wake up in a long time. Liana's fingers hovered over the screen. She was trying to type something else. She was crying. Silently, the only way she knew how. A passenger 2 rows back stood up. "This is wrong!" Another voice. "She's a child!" And then someone shouted, "Let her go!" People didn't know who I was. Not yet. But in 10 minutes, this entire airline would. 1 hour earlier, the morning had started smooth, as always. Liana was quiet but focused, typing on her screen as we rode to the airport. "Are we really staying near the ocean?" she wrote. "Right on the water," I smiled. "Corner suite, private balcony. I even got your favorite kind of cereal delivered to the room." That got me half a smile. I always over-prepare. Traveling with a child who can't speak isn't about packing bags. It's about anticipating the hundreds of ways the world might misunderstand her. I'd called the airline twice, filled out all the paperwork, emailed access bridge verification forms, confirmed her speech device was cleared for in-flight use. We had early boarding and bulkhead seats, enough space for her chair and her calm. We arrived 3 hours early. Checked in. TSA gave no issue. The gate agent smiled and helped us down the jet bridge before general boarding. That's when the calm broke. The first flight attendant, a young man named Jared, greeted us with warmth, helped lift the aisle arm so Liana could park her chair neatly. But then, Monica entered. She didn't greet us. She didn't look at us. She stood at the end of the row and said sharply, "She can't sit here." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "This row is designated emergency assist. Passengers must be able to follow verbal instructions. If she can't speak, she can't respond." I stayed calm. These are bulkhead seats, not exit row. Therefore accessibility. Everything was pre-approved. Monica crossed her arms. "Pre-approval doesn't override safety." Liana began typing, slowly, deliberately. Her screen lit up. "I understand emergency procedures. I'm not a danger." Monica didn't even glance at the screen. "You have 2 options," she snapped. "Move to the back, or get off the plane." I turned to Liana. Her eyes were wide. Her shoulders had tensed. She was scared. She was trying to be brave. "I'd like to speak to the captain," I said evenly. Monica's voice sharpened. "Captain defers to my decision on passenger compliance." And then, louder, "Security!" The air in the cabin changed. Passengers stopped chatting. Phones came out. Someone started filming. Liana flinched. Her hands shook. She was still trying to type. Still trying to explain herself. Still trying to prove she was human enough to stay. A man in his 60s stood up, voice calm but firm. "I'm a physician. That girl is nonverbal, not uncompliant. Your behavior is medically and ethically outrageous." Monica ignored him. "Please sit down, sir, or I'll have you removed as well." An officer appeared. "Is there a problem here?" "She's not following protocol," Monica insisted. "She cannot respond vocally. She is a safety risk." I shook my head. "That's not true. Her system is FAA cleared. Her seat is documented. She's flown dozens of times, on this exact airline." The officer looked between us, visibly uncomfortable. "Sir, I think we should step off and talk this through." Liana's eyes met mine, wet, exhausted. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I knew the second I shouted, they'd win. I helped her into her chair. Jared, The kind attendant whispered, "I'm sorry." Another passenger muttered, "This is disgusting." A woman said, "I'm not flying if she's not." We rolled off in silence, but the moment wasn't over. It was just waking up. Outside the plane, the terminal buzzed. Some passengers had followed. Some were arguing, others filmed. One woman even hugged Liana. Then, "Ms. Brooks?" I turned. Samuel Diaz, station manager, eyes wide, confused. "I just saw the manifest update. You were removed." I nodded. "Because she can't speak." Monica refused to acknowledge her device, her credentials, anything. She humiliated my daughter. Mr. Diaz's face hardened. "That's illegal and unacceptable." Liana tapped her device. "Why do people hate what they don't understand?" He crouched beside her. "I don't know, sweetie, but you won't be treated like that again." And I, still silent, took out my phone, opened an app, tapped into the FDCI backend. VistaJet Midwest, compliance level, green status, certified. I toggled one switch, downgrade to non-compliant. Behind me, Diaz's radio crackled. "Sir, FAA alert. VistaJet compliance flag triggered. We've lost approval to board assisted passengers at 63 terminals." His head snapped toward me. "You?" he whispered. I nodded. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just made it fair. The first sign that something had shifted came not from the people, but from the screens. Behind the check-in counter, one of the monitors blinked, once, twice, and then flashed red. Access bridge. Priority alert. VJM 482. DEN. TPA FDCI. Compliance. Downgraded. Non-compliant action required. Terminal suspension initiated. The young agent behind the desk froze. She leaned forward, confused. Manager Diaz," she called out. "You need to see this." He was already walking back from where he had spoken to Liana and me. I could tell he'd received something on his radio. His eyes weren't just wide now. They were locked in. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," he muttered. The agent turned the monitor toward him. He stared. Then his lips tightened. "We just lost FDCI access. That means—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I did. "That means VistaJet can no longer board any assisted passenger at any access bridge terminal until full compliance is re-verified." That was 63 terminals across the country. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath. "This fast?" I gave a quiet nod. "When the system works, it works fast." Samuel Diaz turned to me, half shocked, half stunned. "You're that Brooks." I didn't say anything. He looked at Liana, who was still watching, quiet but alert. "You built the thing that's kicking us out of our own infrastructure." I turned my attention to Liana. "No, she built it. I just gave it a name." The ripple effects weren't slow. They were instant. Within minutes, 3 more monitors inside the terminal lit up with compliance warnings. The boarding bridge to Gate 22, where our flight had been, froze mid-sequence. The scanner turned red. The crew inside started radioing furiously. I overheard the codes. "VJM 482, halt boarding. Repeat, halt boarding. Compliance risk." And then came the knock-on effects. Flights with pre-approved passengers requiring accessibility were flagged for audit. The VistaJet scheduling system began pulling back boarding passes. Flights to and from Denver, Austin, Charlotte, and Sacramento, all showing pending reauthorization. People started asking questions, and Monica started to panic. She came stomping back into the gate area, her uniform still pressed, but her posture less so. She was scanning the room until her eyes landed on me and Liana. There was something different in her now. Less command, more calculation. She walked straight up to us, ignoring the cluster of crew members now murmuring near the boarding desk. "What did you do?" she hissed under her breath. I looked at her without blinking. "I did what you refused to do. I recognized my daughter as a human being." "This isn't over," she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. You're right, it isn't. Because this isn't just about us. It's about every person you've ever treated like they were less because they couldn't speak your language, or speak at all. She stepped closer. You could have just taken the next flight. But no, you had to, what? Make a scene? I didn't flinch. I didn't make a scene. You did. I made a change. Monica looked like she wanted to say more, but then Samuel Diaz's voice cut through the terminal loud and sharp. Monica Rains, step aside, please. She turned. He was already walking toward her, flanked by another uniformed crew manager and a man in a suit, VistaJet's legal representative. The suit had just arrived. You could tell by the briefcase and the silence around him. Ms. Rains, the man said, please follow us to operations now. She hesitated. Why? Diaz replied flatly. There's an open investigation into passenger discrimination, willful violation of FAA protocol, and interference with a registered accessibility system. Your flight status is suspended pending full review. But the legal rep raised a hand. No further discussion. This way. Monica turned and walked, stiff, escorted by the two men. Her eyes darted to me once. Just once. But there was no more fire left in her. The room was too quiet for anyone to pretend nothing had happened. 15 minutes later, Samuel Diaz returned. He knelt again beside Liana, who hadn't taken her eyes off him since he'd left. He spoke softly. Your seats are still yours. We've reassigned a new crew. No Monica. Not ever again. Liana typed quickly. Thank you. That helps. He looked up at me. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have had to do what you did, but I'm glad you did it. I nodded, not out of gratitude, just acknowledgement. There's still more to do. Diaz tilted his head. What happens next? I looked toward the monitor, now glowing orange. Next, VistaJet Midwest either signs the Passenger Communication Equity Charter or they start pulling planes out of the sky. As we waited for reboarding, people slowly began approaching, one by one. A young woman in scrubs. I work with nonverbal kids. What you did today, your daughter, people needed to see that. An elderly couple. Our grandson uses a tablet too. They tried something similar to him once. We didn't know you could fight it like that. Even a teen boy, maybe 17, handed Liana a pack of gum and just said, "You're cool." Then walked away like it meant nothing. But her smile said it meant everything. Back at the boarding gate, the reboarding began. Same plane, new crew. The new lead flight attendant, a woman in her 50s with a calm voice and clear eyes, greeted us personally. "Welcome back, Ms. Brooks. Liana, we're honored to have you." Liana typed, "Is this the same seat?" "Yes," the attendant smiled. "But we added a blanket, a snack basket, and your favorite drink. Hope that's okay?" Liana gave a thumbs up. Her fingers started typing again. "This is the first time I felt heard." As I helped her into her seat, I looked down at my daughter, my brave, brilliant, utterly voiceless daughter, and felt something shift inside me. I had spent years building systems for people like her, advocating, designing, negotiating, but I'd forgotten one thing. The system means nothing if the people inside it still choose cruelty. This wasn't about a policy, or a seat, or even a flight. It was about dignity. And now that dignity had a name, a price, and a response measured in airports. Before takeoff, my phone buzzed. An alert from Access Bridge. FDCI. Update. 27 additional reports of non-compliant crew behavior logged. Charter escalation recommended. Do you wish to initiate system-wide audit? I glanced at Liana. She was staring out the window, her fingers resting on her lap, screen dark for the first time all morning. I smiled. "Yes," I typed. "Initiate." When the plane finally touched down in Tampa, the air felt different. It wasn't just the humidity or the palm trees outside the window. It was the silence. The kind of silence that comes right after a storm. But before the press shows up, Liana leaned her head against the window. She hadn't typed a word in over an hour. I looked down at her hands, resting still on her lap, tablet dark, and I knew. She wasn't scared anymore. She was watching, not the world outside, but the world inside. We exited the plane to polite smiles and a new ground crew that acted like we were royalty. Margaret, the lead flight attendant, walked beside us the whole way, as if daring anyone to interrupt. At the bottom of the jet bridge stood two men in suits. One was from Access Bridge. The other wore a badge from the FAA. Both looked nervous, not because of me, because they'd read the report, because the entire system had. "Ms. Brooks," the FAA rep said, "could we have a moment of your time?" Liana glanced at me. I nodded. Of course. We followed them into a private lounge. Not a fancy VIP suite, just a quiet space away from the noise. And for the first time in hours, I sat down. Liana parked her chair beside me, eyes locked on the FAA badge. The man cleared his throat. "My name's Dennis Hall. I oversee regulatory compliance for federal accessibility enforcement. We received the compliance drop on VistaJet Midwest about 34 minutes ago." He glanced at his tablet. "I'm going to be honest. We've never seen a drop trigger that fast, or that wide." "I built it that way," I replied calmly. "Delay costs lives." The Access Bridge rep, a younger man named Cole, shifted awkwardly. "It's gone viral, Tasha. The incident, the clip, Monica grabbing Liana's arm, the screen showing her message. It's been posted to X, Threads, TikTok, everywhere." He hesitated. "It's past 2.8 million views." Liana turned to me. Her tablet lit up. "Was I wrong to let people see?" I shook my head. "No, they needed to." Dennis continued. "Here's where it gets more serious. This morning, Monica's name triggered 4 additional passenger complaints. From previous flights, non-verbal passengers, elderly passengers, a veteran with a cognitive impairment." I looked him in the eye. "Are they just now being reviewed?" He didn't blink. "No, they were dismissed. By her manager." "Then the system's already failing," I said. He nodded slowly. "Which is why we're not here to apologize. We're here to ask if you're willing to escalate, officially, to Senate committee oversight." I leaned back in the chair. That was fast, faster than even I expected. Cole from Access Bridge spoke again. "If you authorize full charter activation, we'd move from optional policy to mandated federal standard. That means all airlines, domestic and international operating on U.S. soil, would have to install and train on the cabin nonverbal communication system within 90 days. I looked at Liana. She was listening to every word, not breathing heavy, not panicking, just absorbing. Then she typed, "I think people need to feel what I felt, at least once, so they don't do it again." Dennis exhaled through his nose. "We're ready if you are." I nodded once. "Trigger the charter." It took less than 10 minutes. Access Bridge sent the Tier 1 directive to their entire network. FAA issued a joint statement with the Department of Transportation. ADA, American Disability Association, posted their support minutes later. The official language read, "Effective immediately. Any commercial airline operating within the United States must implement the Passenger Communication Equity Charter and install CNVC, Cabin Nonverbal Communication, protocols across all aircraft. Failure to comply will result in temporary suspension from FDCI authorization and a formal federal inquiry into disability discrimination." Back at the terminal, press had already gathered. Cameras, boom mics, curious stares. I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was who stepped forward first. A woman, early 60s, walking with a cane. Her name tag read, Captain Elena Meyer. "I'm a retired pilot," she said, standing next to me. "And I wanted to tell you something in person." I waited. She looked at Liana. "I had a daughter, born without verbal capacity. She passed when she was 8. Silence. "I watched that clip last night, and I cried, not because it was cruel. I'm used to cruel. I cried because you—" She nodded at Liana. "You never once looked angry, only disappointed, like you expected better." Liana typed slowly. I always expect better. From adults. Captain Meyer wiped her eye. Today, she said, you made the sky safer for kids who've never been heard before. Thank you. And then came the surge. Mothers, teachers, veterans, passengers from that same flight. Even a VistaJet pilot walked over to shake Liana's hand. The media started asking questions, but I didn't answer. Not yet, because in that moment, it wasn't about what I'd say. It was about what they'd feel, and they felt it. The shift. Back at headquarters, VistaJet's board was in chaos. An internal email leaked within an hour. All 63 FDCI access terminals suspended for VistaJet Midwest. 420 Melbourne salaries in contract value frozen pending reinstatement. Crew training programs to be audited. Monica Raines, terminated. All past discrimination reports reopened. That's how the system collapses. Not with one big explosion, but with one small girl, typing. We spent the night in Tampa quietly. Liana didn't want to talk, not because she was upset, but because, for the first time in her life, she didn't need to explain herself. She belonged, without proof, without apology. I tucked her in, brushing back her hair like I had since she was a baby. She typed one last thing before turning off her screen. Today made me tired, but not sad. I kissed her forehead. That's good. She smiled, then tapped again. Do you think she'll be better now? I paused. Maybe, maybe not. But now, I added, there's a rule in place for the ones who won't be. 3 days after the incident, the video hit 10 million views. Not reposts, not edits. The original clip, Monica grabbing Liana's arm. The screen flashing, I understand the safety rules. The silent tears, and my stillness, had reached nearly every corner of the internet. And Monica was finally speaking. It started with a blurry Zoom interview on a local morning show. She sat in a plain room, hair down, face bare. The host, too polished to be neutral, led with, Monica, thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the flight that's made national headlines. Monica gave a tight, tired smile. First, I want to say, I never meant to hurt that girl. I was following protocol. That's what we're trained to do. I didn't know who her mother was. There it was. Not, I didn't know she was nonverbal. Not, I didn't know she was pre-approved. Just, I didn't know who her mother was. The host leaned in. But there's now a federal charter carrying her name, and you were terminated. Monica's voice stiffened. I've worked 14 years in this industry. I've served thousands of flights. We're told to prioritize safety. That's what I did. The host nodded slowly. There are also reports that this wasn't your first incident involving passengers with disabilities. Monica blinked. That part wasn't in the question she was promised. I was watching the interview from my kitchen in Alexandria, sipping coffee. Liana quietly next to me at the table, tapping through her schoolwork. She paused when Monica's face appeared. Is that her? She typed. I nodded. That's her. Liana stared at the screen, then slowly turned it off. She didn't want to hear it, didn't need to. She'd lived it. Meanwhile, the real investigation had begun. The FAA, ADA, and Access Bridge had opened a joint review task force, not just into Monica, but into every unresolved complaint against VistaJet's East Coast crew rotation. What they found? A pattern. Dismissed reports. A captain who claimed he'd seen Monica humiliate a deaf passenger 2 months earlier. An elderly woman who had submitted a letter about being talked down to like a child after asking for a wheelchair. Even a former flight attendant who filed an internal memo. Monica is a liability. She's reckless with passengers who need empathy. That one had been buried. Not anymore. Monica's second interview didn't go as planned. This time, the journalist was tougher, no scripted fluff. You've said this was about safety, but 3 separate FAA-certified accessibility reports show the passenger was pre-approved. Her device was registered. The seats were assigned correctly. So, what part of safety were you enforcing? Monica hesitated. I thought she couldn't respond if something happened. So, did you ever try listening to her device? I didn't realize she was using one. It was on her lap, lit up, in clear view. Silence. Ms. Rains, do you understand why this has become national? Monica swallowed. Because her mom is powerful. No, the host replied. Because your behavior isn't rare. But her mom finally had the tools to expose it. Back at Access Bridge HQ, our legal team finalized the data dump. Every major airline was sent a compliance map showing where they stood on the FDCI spectrum. Green meant clear. Yellow meant at risk. Red meant frozen. VistaJet Midwest? Red. Fully grounded for disability-related service. The pressure was building. In less than a week, they'd lost $420 million in service contracts, 63 airport boarding rights, 3 federal aviation partnerships, 1 CEO, who quietly resigned for personal reasons. And they hadn't seen the worst yet. Because then came the hearings. The Senate Transportation Committee requested a formal statement from Access Bridge, not just about what happened, but about why it kept happening. They wanted to know why it took a CEO to force the system to respond, why 27 prior complaints were dismissed, why disability training remained optional for crew, why no one thought a child crying silently might still be in distress. They asked if I'd be willing to testify. I said yes, not as Tasha Brooks, CEO, but as Liana's mother. The day of the hearing, Liana came with me. She wore a navy dress, the one with small silver buttons and butterfly pins. I wore black. No logos, no makeup, just intention. We entered the room quietly. No security detail, no PR flack. And when it was my turn, I stood. But I didn't go on and on. I simply said, "My daughter is not a problem. She's not broken. She's not difficult to serve. She's just quiet. And in this country, quiet should never mean invisible." There was silence. And then I added, "I built a system to protect passengers like her. But no system can fix a culture that excuses cruelty. That's why today, I'm not asking for enforcement. I'm demanding transformation." Later that night, Liana and I sat on the hotel balcony overlooking Capitol Hill. She typed something and slid the screen to me. I didn't understand everything, but I think they did. I nodded. They did. Is it over? No, I said, but now it's no longer hidden. That same night, Monica's final video surfaced. A shaky cell phone clip from 2 years ago. She was in uniform, arguing with a blind passenger, telling him, "Next time, don't expect us to babysit." It had been quietly deleted back then, but nothing really disappears. Everything you bury eventually resurfaces. The next morning, we got a letter from the White House. Liana was invited to speak through her device at a national accessibility conference, but she said no. Instead, she typed, "Let someone else go next. I already had my turn." That's my girl. 5 days after the hearing, the calls started coming in. Not from lawyers, not from news anchors, from airline CEOs. The first was from Robert Lynn, head of Aerovista Airlines, one of VistaJet's biggest rivals. He didn't call me directly. He went through Access Bridge's legal department, but the message was clear. "We want to be the first airline to adopt full integration of the Passenger Communication Equity Charter. No delays, no negotiation. Just tell us what compliance looks like." That surprised me. CEOs don't usually move that fast, especially not when they think they can still outwait the storm. But this wasn't a storm anymore. It was a shift, and nobody wanted to be the next Monica. Within 48 hours, 3 more airlines joined. Transequator, Falcon Air, Horizon Link. Their reps asked for training modules, tech specs, implementation roadmaps. One of them even said, "Can we put Liana in the video campaign?" I declined, politely. This wasn't about PR. This was about fixing something broken. and you don't patch a leak with a slogan. Meanwhile, the FAA was under pressure. Journalists kept asking the same question. If Access Bridge had the data all along, why didn't the FAA act sooner? The answers got more uncomfortable by the day. An internal email leaked, dated 6 months earlier, showed that a junior analyst had flagged Monica's flight behavior as a potential red-level concern. The response? Let the airline handle it internally. That phrase became a headline. Let the airline handle it. The loophole that left passengers vulnerable. The story trended for 2 full days. At home, Liana didn't talk about it much, but I could tell she was still tracking it. She'd scroll through the news on her tablet, fingers brushing headlines, eyes flicking toward me whenever something hit close. One night she typed, "Do they really want to change, or just look like they do?" I thought for a moment. "Both," I said. "But even pretending forces them to look at the truth, and sometimes that's how real change starts." She nodded once, then tapped. "So what's next?" Next was data. Access Bridge released a public audit of 10 years' worth of accessibility records across 12 major airlines. How many passengers were denied boarding? How many ADA violations were reported? How many were followed up? How many, quietly, weren't? The numbers were ugly. Between 2012 and 2022, over 84,000 complaints related to passengers with disabilities had been filed. Less than 12% were escalated beyond a manager. Only 2.1% resulted in any form of disciplinary action. And in nearly 40% of the files, the reason for closing the case was passenger failed to comply verbally. The irony made me sick. But data speaks. And this time, the system listened. The Department of Transportation issued a new directive. All AD-related flight complaints will now trigger independent review. Airlines no longer have sole authority in disability-related disputes. Boom. That one sentence restructured an entire layer of air travel. No more, let the airline handle it. Now it was, let accountability handle it. Meanwhile, VistaJet was still reeling. They tried damage control, quick fixes, interviews, corporate apology tours. Their new CEO, a woman named Elaine Watts, issued a full public apology. She looked directly into the camera and said, "What happened to Liana Brooks is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of a culture we failed to monitor. That ends now." It was the right thing to say, but it was too late to say it alone. Because the real shift wasn't happening at the top. It was happening in the crew rooms, the terminals, the places where Monica still worked, quietly, confidently, until now. One video surfaced from a training session at Aerovista. A new flight attendant asked, "What happens if a passenger can't speak?" The instructor didn't hesitate. "You listen, just not with your ears." That line went viral again. And for once, it wasn't rage fueling it. It was relief. A week later, Access Bridge hosted a live webinar titled Equity at 30,000 Feet. Over 17,000 airline employees logged in. Liana sat beside me during the intro. I didn't plan on speaking, but halfway through, one of the panelists asked, "What would you say to crew members who still don't think nonverbal passengers can follow safety protocols?" Liana tapped, then tapped again, and turned the screen. "If you don't trust me to understand safety, why do you trust me to survive a crash?" Silence. Then applause. Even on mute, we could feel it through the screen. Later that evening, we received a message from someone unexpected. Not an airline, not a senator, a former passenger. It was just a short voice message. "Hi, my name is Michael. I'm 62. I use a communication board. Never talked to anyone on a plane in 20 years. But after what your daughter did, I told a flight attendant my name for the first time. She called me sir. That's new. Thank you." I played it twice. Liana didn't say anything. She just leaned against my arm. And that was enough. Meanwhile, FAA announced the next step. Not just training. Certification. Flight attendants across the country would now be graded on passenger ethics and communication. including nonverbal response scenarios. It wasn't optional. It wasn't nice to have. It was federal. They called it the FDCI Ethics Index. The same system I'd helped build in theory, now implemented in law. And every crew member would have a score, not to punish them, but to protect the people they serve. By the end of the month, things had changed. Monica's incident was used in 5 training simulations. VistaJet Midwest stock dropped 32%. Liana's story became part of FAA's national ethics curriculum, and 12 new airlines reached out to Access Bridge with one question: can we do better? The answer, of course, was yes, but only if they actually meant it. Back home, I found Liana at her desk, watching a live stream of a press conference. A reporter asked the Secretary of Transportation, "What made the tipping point happen?" He paused, then said, "A child with no voice made the system speak." Liana looked at me, beaming. "Accurate," she typed. I laughed. "Yeah, not bad." She tapped again. "Do you think it'll stay this way?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth is, nothing stays. It has to be held, reinforced, refought, relearned. But I looked at her, and I said, "Yes, if we keep showing up." They met in a hotel ballroom in Dallas. No press, no recording, no official minutes. Just 19 executives from the top 12 airlines in North America, sitting in uncomfortable suits, drinking silent coffee. And the one thing on the agenda? What the hell do we do now? The room was tense, not because they didn't see this coming, but because they did. And they still hoped it would blow over. The CEO of Skynova broke the silence first. He cleared his throat and said, "This isn't just about one flight attendant anymore. It's about perception. It's about control. And right now, we have none." Another exec muttered, "We lost $46 in bookings last week alone." Someone else added, "4 of our crew just quit. Said they were scared of getting filmed for doing anything wrong." That's what they were afraid of. Not the injustice, not the passengers, the camera. Meanwhile, somewhere across the ocean, the World Aviation Standards Summit was preparing its biggest panel yet. For the first time, they weren't inviting just policy experts or airline owners. They were inviting passengers, disabled passengers, parents of disabled children, and sitting at the top of that invite list was Liana. Well, officially, it was addressed to Ms. Tasha Brooks, CEO of Access Bridge Holdings. But the letter made it clear, we would be honored to hear a short message, typed or read, by Ms. Liana Brooks. She has reminded the world that ethics begins at eye level. I showed it to Liana while she was brushing her doll's hair. She looked at the invite, then typed, "Is that the one with the flags?" "Yeah," I said. "It's international." She thought for a second, then typed again. "Okay, I'll go, but I'm not dressing boring." Back in Dallas, the airline CEOs continued their closed-door session. Someone finally said it. "Do we sign the charter?" The room went quiet again. The charter they were referring to wasn't a government mandate, yet. It was the Passenger Ethics Accord spearheaded by Access Bridge and the FAA, outlining new standards in crew training, tech integration, and complaint transparency. Signing it would mean opening their training systems to federal inspection, agreeing to publish ethics score data quarterly, accepting third-party passenger advocates on advisory boards. And worst of all, for them, it would mean admitting they'd failed before. The CEO of Falcon Air leaned back and said flatly, "Sign it, or get ready to explain to shareholders why we're the last ones on the wrong side of history." No one argued. By the time Liana and I landed in Switzerland, 9 airlines had signed the accord. Not in private, in press conferences, with microphones, flags, pledges, and one shared message. We are changing not because we have to, but because we finally realize we should have long ago. It sounded good, maybe even honest, but I knew better. Change doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts in fear. And right now, They were scared. Of passengers, of cameras, of being next. The summit was held in a high-rise conference center in Geneva. Liana wore a gold jacket and butterfly hair clips. I wore a black blazer and low heels. No script, no branding. We arrived at the green room, and the coordinator asked gently, would she like to go before or after the delegate from Spain? Liana typed, before. I'm not waiting for adults to finish. They laughed. I didn't. She meant it. When her name was called, the crowd hushed. Liana was the smallest figure on the stage. No teleprompter, no standing ovation. Just her and the screen. She tapped a single sentence. It echoed across 700 people in the room and 4 million watching online. If I'm strong enough to fly, you should be brave enough to change. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then more. And then everyone stood. Not because she was powerful, but because she was undeniable. That night something strange happened. A video went viral. But it wasn't Liana. It was a secret recording from the Dallas CEO meeting. Someone in that room, maybe a whistleblower, maybe just tired, had recorded the whole thing. And in it, a voice clearly said, let's just sign the charter so we stop bleeding money. We can scale back later once the media cools. The backlash was immediate. The headline on every screen the next morning, they never meant it. Airlines caught faking reform plan. I expected panic, retractions, PR team scrambling. But something better happened. One by one, junior flight attendants, regional managers, ex-crew, all started posting. We meant it, even if our bosses didn't. They posted photos in training rooms, holding signs. Passenger ethics matter. I serve with dignity. Liana changed me. It wasn't a campaign. It was real. The frontline staff, finally, started owning the change the top feared, and the industry began shifting from the bottom up. Liana saw it all on her tablet. She looked up at me that night while brushing her teeth. Did I do that? I smiled. No, you started that. They're the ones choosing to finish it. She paused, then typed, good. I have school next week. I'm not fixing airplanes forever. The announcement came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Germany, Japan, Canada, Brazil. 4 countries, 4 governments, 4 languages. One message. Effective January 1st, all domestic and international carriers operating within our airspace must adopt the Brooks Protocol. Non-compliance will result in operational suspension. It was real now. Global. Not just a US story. Not just a one-time scandal. It was law. And the industry didn't take it well. Within 24 hours, 3 major international airlines issued public statements of compliance, but not everyone followed suit. VistaJet Midwest, they went dark. No press release, no update, no tweet. They just went silent. And that's how we knew something was up. 3 days later, an article appeared in a niche aviation policy blog. Small publication, low traffic, but the headline was sharp. Brooks Protocol will bankrupt regional airlines, experts say. It cited anonymous senior executives, independent cost analysts, and aviation freedom coalitions. It claimed the policy was rushed, biased, and based on anecdotal incidents. Buried halfway through the article was a quote. The emotional manipulation by certain high-profile families has distorted rational policymaking. I stared at that sentence for 10 minutes, and then I realized they were coming for Liana. The next 48 hours were a blur. Cable pundits started weighing in. Some defended the policy, but others? Should a child's trauma dictate aviation law? When feel-good stories become federal overreach? Is the Brooks Protocol ADA reform or woke optics? They never said her name, but they didn't have to. The comments were worse. One thread read, "Pretty sure that CEO mom planned the whole thing to boost her company." Another, "If the kid can't even talk, how do we know what really happened?" It burned. But not in the way I expected. Not as a mother. as a builder. I'd spent my life building systems that made invisible people visible, and now they wanted to erase my daughter because she made them uncomfortable. Liana saw it. She didn't ask me. She didn't cry. She just walked over, grabbed her iPad, and typed, "Am I a problem now?" I swallowed hard, shook my head. "No, baby, you're the solution they're scared of." She nodded once, then typed, "Then they should be scared louder." That night, someone leaked an internal VistaJet Midwest memo. It had been distributed to all management-level staff under the title, Strategic Framing in Ethics Reform Era. Translation: a playbook on how to survive reform without actually changing. Some of the bullet points: delay onboarding new compliance tech to Q3 2026. Reclassify complaints to training advisory status to avoid FDCI scoring impact. Public-facing staff must refer to Brooks Protocol as pilot initiative. Avoid referencing Liana Brooks by name in any media inquiry. That last line, that was the one that did it. The backlash reversed. Twitter exploded. This child stood up to the system, and now the system's trying to bury her. I was neutral before, not anymore. #StandWithLiana. VistaJet wants her name off the airwaves? Let's put it on every screen. In 12 hours, the hashtag #Brooks Protocol hit 20 million uses. A TikTok clip of Liana's summit quote, "If I'm strong enough to fly," got reposted with the caption, "She didn't speak to be a hero. She typed to survive." It was no longer about airline reform. It was about who gets to be heard and who gets erased when they finally are. The FAA responded swiftly. They issued a cease and desist letter to VistaJet Midwest's regional division. Any policy designed to obscure or delay compliance with federal accessibility standards will be considered an act of procedural sabotage and treated as a breach of operational ethics. That same day, 4 whistleblowers from VistaJet's HR department came forward, publicly. They provided screenshots of internal chats where regional leaders mocked ADA training modules, and in one case, labeled the incident with Liana as a minor embarrassment blown out of proportion. That line made headlines. But while the internet was busy defending Liana, she retreated. She stopped checking her tablet, stopped going to her physical therapy sessions, stopped eating at the table. I found her curled up in a reading chair one night, blanket around her knees, looking small again. I sat next to her and whispered, "You want me to make it stop?" She didn't type anything, just shook her head, slowly. Then finally tapped, "I want to keep going, but it's too loud right now." The next morning, I turned down 2 interviews. I told the network producers, "No more spotlight. She's not your headline. She's a human." But she surprised me that afternoon. She walked into my home office, holding her tablet, typed one word, "Script." I turned. Script for what? A message. My words, not yours. I waited. She typed for 20 minutes, deleted, typed again, then handed it to me. The next day, Access Bridge posted a 57-second video across all platforms. It opened with no music, no logo, just Liana, sitting calmly in her yellow hoodie, the tablet in her lap. And her typed message, spoken by a clear narrator voice. "They say I shouldn't be part of the law, but I was part of the flight. They say I'm too small to change the system, but the system changed when it touched me. You don't have to like me. You just have to stop hurting people like me." Then, fade to black. No hashtags, no CTA. Just silence. And the world listened. The letter came in a cream envelope with a red seal. No branding. No subject line. Just a return address from The Hague. I opened it cautiously. Inside, a single printed message. "Ms. Tasha Brooks, we respectfully invite your daughter, Ms. Liana Brooks, to deliver a voluntary statement, verbal or written, before the International Coalition on Passenger Rights and Accessibility. This testimony will become part of the Permanent Aviation Ethics Charter submitted to the United Nations." There was no signature, just the seal of the ICPRA and a quiet request. She changed the conversation. Now let her change the law. I sat with the letter for a full hour before saying a word. Part of me was proud. Part of me was terrified. Because this wasn't just news coverage anymore. It wasn't trending hashtags or op-eds. It was history. And they wanted my daughter to speak into it. Liana was folding socks when I told her. She looked up, eyebrows raised, expression blank. Then, slowly, she reached for her iPad. Will I have to go alone? No, I'll be there, every second. Will they listen to me? They're not just listening, they're writing it down in stone. She paused, typed. Then, let's write it well. But halfway across the ocean, VistaJet Midwest was unraveling. The federal investigation was no longer civil. It had gone criminal. A series of leaked documents showed that not only had the airline tried to bypass Brooks' protocol, they'd attempted to sabotage it. They pressured whistleblowers to recant. They paid third-party PR firms to smear the initiative. They even edited internal cabin logs to delete mention of dragging or forcibly removing passengers. Worse still, someone inside had kept the original flight video. And when that surfaced, it was undeniable. Liana, being dragged down the narrow aisle, her tablet falling, her eyes locked on the ceiling in silent panic. There was no noise, no scream, just resistance, and then collapse. The silence made it more powerful. Public rage reignited. The FAA issued a complete operational freeze on VistaJet Midwest. 63 airports suspended landing permissions. $420 million in pending fuel and service contracts were voided overnight. By Friday morning, the CEO had resigned. By Saturday, the DOJ had opened charges of criminal negligence, document tampering, and intentional obstruction of federal reform. And the name on every screen wasn't VistaJet. It was Liana Brooks. Again. We flew to The Hague in silence. No press, no welcome crew, just an escort van, a black car driver, and a woman named Corinne from the ICPRA who handed Liana a folder and whispered, "You don't have to perform, you just have to exist." We stayed in a small suite in a hotel with soft walls and no news channels. Liana read her old journals. I deleted 12 emails from reporters. That night, while brushing her hair, I asked gently, "You sure about this?" She typed, "Yes, but don't say anything for me. This time, it's my voice." I kissed her forehead. The chamber room was a dome of glass and brass. Representatives from 42 countries sat around a U-shaped table. Cameras were limited. No live broadcast, just archivists and note-takers. When Liana entered, the room didn't applaud. They stood. She wheeled to the center podium, placed her tablet on the stand, took a breath, then tapped, word by word. "You've written laws that assume I don't exist. You've trained staff to manage problems, not people. You've spent more on lawsuits than on ramps. I can't talk, but I see everything. I was silent on that flight, but I wasn't invisible, and now you're going to remember me in every policy you ever write again." Silence. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Then one delegate from Norway leaned into his mic. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks. That was the clearest testimony we've heard in years." And just like that, it was done. She turned, wheeled back, and looked relieved, not proud, just lighter. Back home, the clip aired on public broadcast. It wasn't loud, wasn't viral, but it reached the right people. Within a month, the passenger ethics bill was introduced to the U.S. Senate, backed by a bipartisan coalition. Canada adopted the Brooks Clause into its Accessibility Act. South Africa launched a partnership with Access Bridge. And in New York's JFK, one flight crew taped a message over the bulkhead. "If you can't speak, we'll still hear you." The Liana Standard. At night, Liana went back to reading novels. She still used the tablet, still moved slower than most, but people saw her differently now. Not as a victim, not as a symbol, just as someone who stood still while the system bent around her. She wasn't chasing justice. She was the gravity it orbited, and for once, the world admitted it. They had 3 months. 3 months to review, revise, and ratify the Brooks Protocol. And when the deadline came, every G20 nation had signed except one: France. No press statement, no official rejection. Just nothing. They let the deadline pass in silence. Within 48 hours, 6 major airport hubs across Europe, Brussels, Amsterdam, Munich, Dublin, Vienna, and Prague, issued a coordinated alert. Effective immediately, all inbound and outbound flights involving non-compliant jurisdictions will be held pending ethical review. It didn't mention France by name, but everyone knew. Charles de Gaulle Airport ground to a halt. In Paris, the media called it an act of retaliation. Airline execs called it political blackmail. One nationalist newspaper called Liana une fabrication, a 15-year-old puppet of a grieving mother's agenda, they wrote. We didn't respond, because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. But in Brussels, something else was unfolding. A private summit. No cameras, no headlines. The founding board of the International Passenger Ethics Coordination Council, IPEACC, was gathering for the first time. 7 voting members, 1 seat left open. The invitation came via encrypted file. We invite Ms. Liana Brooks to serve as a permanent observer and moral authority advisor, with full access to charter drafts, amendment veto rights, and systemic override privileges where human dignity is at stake. She was 15, and they were offering her a seat at the adult table. Not out of pity, but out of necessity. Tasha hesitated. This wasn't a school speech. This wasn't an advocacy summit. This was global power, and power always comes with shadows. But Liana, she just tapped. Don't block me from the table you fought to build. Their first meeting was intense. The room was glass-walled, ringed with acoustic panels, delegates from 5 continents, interpreters murmuring, screens full of passenger data. Tasha stayed quiet in the back, a silent silhouette. Liana wheeled to the central seat and opened her tablet. She didn't say much, but when they debated whether airports in lower-income nations should be exempt from ethical compliance due to economic pressure, she typed one line: "Dignity isn't expensive, neglect is." That line ended the debate. Unanimous vote, no exemptions. Back home, however, France was spinning chaos. National broadcasters rolled out exposés. Did the Brooks Protocol overreach? Are we surrendering to emotional politics? The tyranny of a teenage icon. And then they crossed the line. An anonymous leak, a photo of Liana, age 9, being carried by airport staff after a minor seizure. Caption: Is this the face of the next global regulator? It wasn't journalism, it was humiliation. The backlash came fast. Germany pulled airspace sharing agreements with France. Canada froze bilateral training exercises. And over 300,000 passengers signed a petition to boycott French carriers until the protocol was adopted. But Liana, she didn't ask for revenge. She just tapped one sentence: systems fail when they're afraid of the faces they hurt. Tasha knew what that meant. This wasn't just about France anymore. This was about setting precedent, that no country, no carrier, no executive was above the human beings they carried. And then came the unexpected. A delegation from French civil aviation reached out, privately. No press, no lawyers, just 2 people. They requested a private walkthrough of an access bridge partner facility, one that had fully implemented the Brooks Protocol. Tasha agreed, on one condition: Liana would lead the tour. The walkthrough lasted 3 hours. Liana didn't speak, she just guided, showed them the tactile seating path, the non-verbal alert bracelets, the in-cabin silent reporting system, the multi-language ethics interface. She paused at the final station, pointed to a screen that read, "This seat recognizes your existence, even if others don't." And she typed, "It's not tech, it's respect, The French officials nodded, quietly, and left without comment. 5 days later, the French Prime Minister issued a national address. "We acknowledge the need for dignity to guide our transportation future. We will sign the Brooks Protocol, not as submission, but as a statement of who we choose to become." And just like that, the last domino fell. At JFK, a new plaque was unveiled, in honor of the passenger who couldn't speak but changed what air travel means for us all. The Liana Brooks Standard, 2025. Passengers took photos, flight crews wiped their eyes, and across 63 airports, her name became more than a protocol. It became policy. What would you do if your child was dragged off a plane and the world stayed silent? Tell us where you're watching from and what justice looks like to you. Because sometimes, the quietest voices rewrite the loudest systems. The attack didn't come from a press conference. It came in the form of a silent glitch. A single red warning on the Access Bridge Admin Dashboard, FDCI. Integrity compromised. Followed by 19 unexplained violations. Score drop, 34%. Status, non-compliant. Tasha stared at the screen. This wasn't just a system error. It was a coordinated breach. And it was targeting everything they'd built. For the first 10 minutes, the team scrambled. They checked server logs, compared data caches, rebuilt packet trails, and then they found it. A shadow protocol inserted into the compliance AI. It mimicked real flagging behavior, but instead of catching actual violations, it planted fake infractions based on falsified flight footage and tampered audio logs. Someone was trying to make Brooks Protocol look like it couldn't be trusted, and they were doing it from the inside. By noon, the sabotage had spread to 7 partner airlines. 3 airports went on alert. 1 airport in Turkey suspended FDCI use altogether. News outlets started calling it the protocol collapse. Tasha didn't sleep that night. The next morning, a whistleblower from inside Aerolux International came forward. Encrypted email, no name, just a screenshot of an internal Slack message from the Chief Technology Officer. "The faster Brooks collapses, the faster we go back to normal. If she can't speak for herself, she shouldn't be writing rules for us." Tasha froze. This wasn't just sabotage. It was personal, and it was cruel. That afternoon, Access Bridge called an emergency meeting with the FAA and IPEC. 26 leaders joined the video call. Screens everywhere, faces tight, voices clipped. And in the center, Liana. She sat silently, didn't type, didn't look upset. Just still. When the third speaker began downplaying the breach, calling it technological turbulence, Liana finally raised her hand. Tasha held her breath. Her daughter typed one line. "If turbulence made you cruel, maybe the system was built wrong to begin with." Dead silence, then a ripple of nods. The FAA asked for 72 hours to investigate. Tasha wasn't waiting. She activated a feature they'd kept private, a real-time passenger verification pilot program. Every flagged violation from the past 48 hours was pushed to the actual passengers involved. In under 6 hours, 94% of the so-called incidents were denied by passengers themselves. "I was never denied service. No one ignored me." That didn't happen. The credibility of the shadow attack collapsed in real time, but Liana wasn't done. She made one final move. She published an open letter, handwritten, scanned, and sent to every major airline CEO in 12 languages. "I don't want to run your systems. I don't want to tell your crews what to say. I want to sit in my seat without being hurt. If that's too much to ask, maybe the problem isn't compliance. Maybe it's you." Liana Brooks. The letter went viral, not in the trending hashtag way, but in the sent silently across boardrooms kind of way. CEOs stopped speaking publicly. Aerolux's CTO was suspended. The breach report was submitted to the DOJ. And the most powerful move came not from Tasha or the FAA, but from Heathrow International, the busiest airport in Europe. They issued a one-line policy update. Any airline that does not meet minimum FDCI revalidation will be denied runway clearance until further notice. 23 airports followed within 48 hours, just like that. Liana didn't smile, but she looked out the window that evening and whispered, "They can take shots at me, but they can't break what I made unless I let them." Tasha stood behind her, quiet, proud, exhausted. "Is this what justice feels like?" she asked softly. Liana didn't respond. She just opened her tablet and typed one last line before going to bed. "No, it feels like accountability, and it's louder than justice." The system hadn't just survived. It had defended itself. Because this time, the voice they tried to erase was the one rewriting their rulebook. 6 months after the day Liana Brooks was dragged off a plane, every flight crew in America had to learn her name. Not because they wanted to, but because the FAA made it mandatory. The final ruling came on a rainy Monday afternoon. Tasha had just finished reviewing her 77th compliance proposal when her phone lit up. A single-line message from the FAA ethics director. "Full adoption approved. FDCI now a condition of certification for all domestic and international operators." That meant one thing. Any airline that wanted to land on U.S. soil had 90 days to install, train, and prove live compliance with the Federal Disability Compliance Index, or be stripped of flight authority. And they weren't alone. ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, issued a near-identical mandate. EASA in Europe followed. SkySure, the global aviation insurance body, announced they would no longer insure airlines that failed to pass FDCI audit. The dominoes weren't just falling, they were enforcing each other. In internal airline briefings, managers groaned. Some claimed it would slow onboarding. Others said it would confuse legacy crews. One executive wrote, "We're being held hostage by the feelings of a mute teenager." That executive was fired the next day, publicly, by the board, in a shareholder live stream. The announcement read, "Vision requires empathy. If your leadership lacks both, you do not belong in aviation." It was the most expensive personnel decision in company history, but it saved them $130 million in compliance delays. While the industry scrambled, Liana and Tasha were quiet. They didn't gloat. They didn't speak to media. Instead, they focused on the next layer of change. Because FDCI handled infrastructure. But the next battle was about behavior. That's when they unveiled it, quietly, and with almost no press. A 9-page PDF sent directly to regulators, airports, and airline boards. No branding, no logos, no signatures. Just a title, the Flight Justice Index, an evaluation of moral behavior in transit environments. Each flight crew and passenger would receive a dynamic rating, not based on stars or satisfaction surveys, but on nonverbal behavior, conflict resolution, and engagement with vulnerable populations. Not to punish, but to reveal. The algorithm wasn't biased. It didn't care about skin color or accent. It tracked patterns, interruptions, tone shifts, microaggressions. It flagged crews who consistently overlooked wheelchairs. It highlighted passengers who showed protective behavior toward others. It didn't judge. It just measured. And over time, it painted a picture of who we really were. 35,000 feet above judgment. Initial pushback was brutal. Flight unions called it invasive. Passenger advocacy groups warned of digital shaming. But then came the twist. Seattle-Tacoma Airport announced that every crew with a Flight Justice Index score above 90 would be fast-tracked for terminal access, premium lounge routing, and top-tier contract reviews. Air Japan offered bonuses for top-rated cabin crew. Delta installed live dashboards in break rooms. Suddenly, airline culture wasn't just about safety. It was about respect. And Liana? She watched it unfold from the sidelines. Her face never appeared in ads. Her voice never echoed in speeches. But her name? Her name became the baseline. This crew scored 87 on the Liana standard. This airline just dropped below the Brooks benchmark. Passenger complaint rate against flight justice rating is inconsistent. Re-audit recommended. It wasn't just protocol anymore. It was identity. The final change came during a panel summit in Geneva. Dozens of CEOs, thousands of attendees, and one surprise agenda item: the future of passenger rights in a post-FDCI world. Tasha wasn't on the panel. Liana wasn't even invited. But as the summit opened, a moderator took the stage and said, "Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the individual whose silent resistance became the loudest reform in aviation history." Then came the slide. Just a black and white image of Liana, facing away, seated in her chair, holding her tablet in her lap. No caption, no quote, just her. And the audience stood up, quietly, together. The seatbelt sign had just turned off when Tasha glanced sideways. Liana was already settled, tablet in hand, stylus resting lightly between her fingers. Flight 713, Newark to San Francisco, right back on Vortex Air, the very airline that had once dragged her daughter from a first-class seat like she didn't matter. 1 year ago, this cabin felt like a battlefield. Today, it felt quiet, like the storm had passed. And in its place, protocols, policies, and people who had learned silently. The flight attendant came by, young, Hispanic, nervous, maybe new. She leaned gently toward Liana with a practiced, respectful smile. "Hi there, my name's Anna. Just wanted to check, would you prefer to communicate through your tablet today, or would you like to show me your preferences manually?" No pity, no tension, just kindness, without the performance. Liana nodded, typed quickly. "Tablet is perfect, thank you." Anna smiled again. "Anytime. You let me know if you need anything else." She walked off, no lingering glances, no awkwardness, just dignity. An hour into the flight, a man across the aisle grew irritated. Middle-aged, loud, restless. He snapped at another flight attendant. "Do you have to keep checking on that girl every 5 minutes? She's not some charity case." The words hit the air like turbulence. A few passengers looked over. Tasha felt her hand curl, but before she could say a word, Anna was there, calm, firm. "Sir, that's a violation of our passenger ethics code. I'm going to need you to lower your tone and refrain from commenting on other guests." "Are you serious right now?" the man scoffed. "Very. We follow the Brooks Protocol. Every passenger deserves peace. If you continue, this may affect your clearance profile with future carriers." He blinked, swallowed, didn't say another word. Liana never even looked up. They landed on time. No drama, no notes, no violations. But something else happened. As they waited to disembark, Anna returned. She kneeled down slightly beside Liana, voice low. "I just wanted to say, I know who you are, and I wanted to thank you. My cousin's in a wheelchair. She flew for the first time last week. Said it was the first time she didn't feel invisible." Liana didn't type anything. She just reached out and touched Anna's wrist. Soft, gentle, grateful. Anna smiled and left. In the terminal, Tasha walked a step behind her daughter. She watched as gate agents nodded politely, as signs read, "FDCI certified," in quiet silver. As a mother with a child on crutches was helped first without having to ask. It didn't scream reform. It whispered it. Later that night, Liana uploaded a journal entry. No hashtags, no public post, just a personal file titled Final Descent. Inside it read, "They no longer ask me if I can speak. They ask if I'd like to be heard. That's all I ever wanted." Then she closed the tablet, rolled toward her window, and watched the stars settle into place. And for the first time in a long time, Tasha didn't feel like she had to protect her daughter, because the world had finally learned how to listen without needing a voice. Would you ride quietly on a plane, knowing your silence helped change how the world treats people like your child? Tell us where you're watching from and who you're fighting for, even if they never say a word. Sometimes the loudest legacy is quiet.